Welcome to Knowing Intellectual Motivation. Today I'm going to be talking about two things in particular: psychological flexibility and, importantly, also psychological literacy. The two things that I feel I've learnt most from learning about these two is about myself and how I interact with others and how others see me interacting with them. And has been a lot of good payoffs, which I'll get to in a bit. But the most important thing is it's given me a sense of confidence in understanding things a little bit better. So with that, I'll get into it. So one of the best ways to describe it is about our critical thinking and our scientific thinking, and not just taking things at face value because it's common knowledge, or that someone else said it that has some sort of authority or an understanding of what they think they know, but maybe haven't looked at it past the first step. And something that I've learned about myself, which I found through studying this psychological literacy and psychological flexibility, mouthful, is that the two things that come with how I look at things is I don't just like to look at what is being said, is I like to look at where it comes from, who has said it, and are there other sources that say it. And then I also like to get down to the nuts and bolts and the nitty gritty of what's being said in there. Along with learning about the literacy of psychological literacy is getting more proficient and understanding that domain of knowledge and being able to describe it not only to a close friend, but to someone that's totally new in understanding this, and understanding that they may not understand certain words, and being able to break it down and communicate effectively to them so that they can. And there are these two things that I've also come to learn, which is sort of outside these two character domains, is that we all share the same one conscience of thinking. Like, we say we don't want to be judged and you shouldn't judge people, but deep down I think that's what we want to be. We want to be judged as good people, and we have this ideal thing that people want to think of us as significant in their lives, or that we have something significant or precious to share with them. And when we talk about psychological literacy, I think there's two things that you've got to try and keep in mind, is that when they get upset or when they get offended, it may not just be them, it could be also how we are communicating to them, because there is like all these different areas of, some people like to hear certain things, some people like to see certain things, some people like to feel or be more engaged emotionally as opposed to logically or rationally. And you got to sort of apply the knowledge that you know as you're learning certain domains into being as empathetically as you can about expressing what you need to share, so that it's not just about having the knowledge and being able to understand it at a good amount of depth. It's about understanding it well enough to be able to share it with a range of diverse people, cultures, and audiences, so that they can understand it and then take it in, because it's not just about you knowing it and understanding, it's also about being able to explain and express it. So if I may sort of bring into the psychological flexibility, where the two I think go really hand in hand, and there's also another one where you have interpersonal capacity, but with the psychological flexibility bit, it's also almost like described as psychological resilience, in a sense, with where you have this ability of skills and assets in one area, say soccer or football or something like that, or even tennis, and you don't realize that you're able to chat and work within a team, but then when you go to work, you don't quite have the same skills, but then what you do is you cross-reference how you interact with them and try and adapt and flexibly move that into that area. As well as, say, for instance, if you had a job for a long time and you're doing the same thing and it's really comfortable and you haven't had to think about anything else because it's the same job day in, day out, and then that job gets changed or taken over by computers or artificial intelligence, and now you're left without a job, you sort of have to be flexible enough to adapt some of those pre-learnt skills from other domains, say from high school, or like a job after school, or just even playing football down the oval with some friends after school or something like that, or after work. and being able to adapt those skills of going out and having the courage, I guess, and the tenacity to keep striving with your persistence of going, I need to find another way to sort of either bring in income or remain social, and not make yourself too independent. There is a great asset in having sort of some sort of independence, but there's also, on the same scale in a different context, a huge value in understanding your friends network and your social network. I guess that's the best way to describe it, because they make us feel significant, they make us feel valued, and that's why it's also important to be able to adapt these two areas. So for me, I'll reflect now on how I think it's made me feel, is that there's this, funnily enough, there's a window, and it's called the Johari window, and it sort of woke me up to that I may not be able to see everything as much as I think we like to think we know a lot about certain stuff, that when we describe it a certain way, we're missing the fact that there's other little filler words that we could be putting in our head that they don't actually hear when we're talking to them. And so through this Johari window, there's 4 windows and 4 quadrants. And the first one is basically what we show everyone, and what we show out to the world, and what we project out there. And then there's another one which we keep to ourselves and no one knows about other than what's up in here. And then there's a third one in the third quadrant, which is what we don't really see that other people see about us, because we're not always 100% presently aware of what we're doing. Like, say for instance, my hands and where my eyes are going and my face measure, it just naturally happens, and they give off signals. And so that's in the third quadrant, what other people see. And then in the fourth quadrant, which was the undiscovered bits about ourselves, which is like these skills and assets. Like, for instance, me talking to the camera isn't something that I always ever thought I'd be doing. So this is an undiscovered part about ourselves. And through critical thinking in the psychological literacy part, I feel that has given me a huge amount of deeper understanding to not just take things at face value, like because it's common knowledge or because someone said so or because I feel a certain sense on it. It's made me sort of systematically, sort of not too in depth or too overthinking, but at least go into enough depth of thinking to be able to describe what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking or what maybe some other people are perceiving about me. And it's enabled me to change some of my behaviours, which have now made me see that there's quite a few friends out there that may have been taking me the wrong way because of how I came off. And it could be because I'm too boisterous with my hand gestures. And that comes down to sort of also another category, which is called your EQ, which is your emotional intelligence. And I think for a lot of my early teens and 20s, I was probably lacking in the emotional intelligence. I think I have a good IQ and understanding of logical and rational ways of analysing things, but when it comes to the emotional range, I was out of my depth. So the amazing thing is you can enhance your emotional intelligence by basically training certain thoughts and being a little bit more present with where you're going. But I tell you, it's amazing once you start to develop it, because it's like, wow, it's like in a whole nother world now that you can sort of like, it's like once made of rose-coloured glasses, but some sort of glasses have been taken off and a new filter's put on, and they're like, everything's a little bit more shiny. You see smiles a little bit more, you see the twinkle in people's eyes a little bit more, you see the full broadness and the lines come up in their eyes a little bit more, because you're engaging a little bit more in depth with people, which is fantastic. But I guess to sum this all up in one sort of thing that I can take away from it is being able to adapt it into different areas and being flexible. And someone that's taught me a good way to describe it is that a tree in the wind when it's blowing is really, really good, and it sort of can adjust itself. And a bird that sort of sits on the tree is also another way of looking at it, that when a big gust of wind comes, the bird sort of just sits there and it learns how to bend and move with whatever's coming. So like, even if there's like a really big gust of wind and there's rain and possibly hail, it knows how to handle the rain, and so does the tree. It's flexible, and if it's rigid and doesn't want to, and it's too stiff holding onto the branch, and the branch goes like this, it's going to lose balance. So it knows to be constantly sort of aware and juggling these sort of these environmental changes that we end up having to deal with. And so if you really enjoy those sorts of insights, give us a like, because I'm going to describe a little bit more in depth about the Johari window and some interpersonal capacities, so that for me they've really opened up some avenues and been able to help me with sort of my career, catching up with friends, and basically the whole fulfillment in life and purpose in life has become better just by being able to dive into these psychological literacy and psychological flexibility, and it's helped me adjust the way I live my life a little bit more and made it more fulfilling. Like, I tell you, the jobs that I used to do in the past, I go home with absolutely no energy for my family, and it sort of now explains a little bit why I came off a little bit tired in the afternoons, because I just didn't have the energy to be able to deal with this. And so by being a little bit more aware of ourselves and critically thinking about our patterns and our behaviours, I've changed a lot in my life, and so therefore now I feel a bit more flexible and resilient to be able to handle a lot more challenges that come my way. So I hope you've really enjoyed this little introduction to psychological flexibility and psychological literacy. And again, if you want to hear more about this, give us a like. And if you've got any reflections on how you have handled psychological flexibility or psychological literacy, leave us a comment. Thanks, guys.